One of Darling's goals is to spread kindness.
I believe that the best way for me to give back to my community is to plan service events and get Darlings to participate in it.
The organization participates in river cleanups, fundraising, and making holiday cards for the Christus Santa Rosa Hospice Center.
I really like being a part of Darlings because I like being able to give back to the school and the community of San Marcos. I feel like it's really easy to just go to school here and not think about the community you're a part of.
The cards were handmade by members of the organization to wish patients a happy Thanksgiving.
In hospice care patients, there is a stark decline in cards that they get for the holidays because oftentimes people don't quite know what to say to them. And so I wanted us to give them some attention and love that they probably need at this time.
Darling's members want to spread cheer to those who won't be able to go home for the holidays. For Bobcat Update, I'm Lauren Hartung.
Early voting starts October 24th and will end on November 4th. Election Day itself will be held on November 8th. Faculty and students can vote on campus at LBJ Student Center. There will be several voting locations in the city, including the San Marcos Public Library on Hopkins Street and the Hayes Government Center on Stagecoach Trail. Voters will be choosing the next governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. The last day to register is October 11th.
My grandfather used to say, if you have your health, you have everything, and which means that you can always start over. I think mental health is part of that. I am a senior lecturer at Texas State University, and I've been here since this was Southwest Texas State. I've been here 40 years, my 40th year teaching, and being a senior lecturer means that, well, not necessarily, but in my case, being a senior lecturer means that I don't have a PhD. I have a master's, and my master's is in counseling, and I'm also a licensed professional counselor and a certified choice theory reality therapist. So choice theory, very much like its name, is about making better choices. And what I see as my role in life is helping people to find a way to make better choices. I think that cognitive behavioral therapy, there's actual data that shows that it does get more success than anything else right now, and that sometimes combined with an antidepressant is the best choice for depression, and that they suggest, most of the literature suggests, you try cognitive behavioral therapy alone first, and then if that doesn't get you enough change, then you can go to the combination of that with an antidepressant. And I am totally agree with that notion. I think that also goes for anxiety. I think try the CBT first, see if you can get enough change. If you can't, then maybe you need an anti-anxiety combined with that. I don't think you should let yourself suffer too long, because it's hard to do better when you can't stay focused. I would say that the place to start with mental health is honestly focusing on what's working in your life rather than what's not working in your life. I think we spend way too much time, especially these days, focusing on what's not working rather than what is working. All of our problems rather than all of the things that make us feel good. And I think that's a simple place to start, and that if everyone did that, everyone would feel just at least a little bit better.
So I have anxiety, depression, and OCD. My diagnoses affect my life by making things a lot more difficult than they have to be. I think especially with OCD, it's like every other second of my day is filled by like intrusive thoughts or just like seemingly stupid things that all of a sudden like ruin the course of my day. And so trying to constantly on a daily basis redirect my day positively gets really tiring. So it can be really exhausting just to exist sometimes. I have spent a lot of time trying to separate my life from my diagnoses, because it can get really like tricky to just live as that diagnosis. You kind of lose a part of yourself when you're like, oh, it's my depression acting up today. Oh, it's my anxiety acting up, or oh, there's my OCD, you know? And so when you kind of begin to separate that, I think life gets a little easier because you become your own person who manages diagnoses and not just the diagnoses. When things first started getting really, really bad, I didn't realize that it was that big of a deal, you know? I think I went to my psychologist for the first time and was like, oh yeah, like I feel bad. I don't feel like being here all the time. And I remember telling her that, trigger warning, I remember telling her that I was like self-harming, but I knew a bunch of people who were also doing it. So in my head, it wasn't this like, oh, she's at the worst part of her life, you know? And then that was kind of her like, oh, you're going into hospital. And I was kind of thrown for a loop. I was like, this doesn't happen to me. This doesn't happen to people who grow up in like perfect families and who get really good grades and who do extracurriculars. Like that doesn't happen to people. And it wasn't until I got into that hospital setting, and by hospital I mean like inpatient psychiatric treatment, where I was like, oh, like I do need help. Like this isn't this isn't normal. I think at the beginning of my mental health journey, it really negatively affected my family life. I watched my family slowly become more fearful of my inability to keep myself safe. And as that happened, I realized that they weren't the only ones dealing with trauma and being affected, or no, that I wasn't the only one dealing with trauma or being affected by my illness and my hospitalizations, that as we were going through this, they felt like they needed to be strong for me. And by doing that, they bottled up a lot of emotions and fear. And unfortunately for them, since they weren't getting that like therapy like I was, you know, I watched that extend into the next 5 years after I had been out of treatment.
I don't think life is supposed to be about anxiety and depression and feeling bad. And I think we as a culture are focusing on everything that's wrong with our culture, with our society, with our feelings, with everything. And we're not paying attention to all the wonderful things we still have.
What?
You're so funny, bro.
I didn't even do anything.
You were just like... Well, I'm very lucky that he's very open-minded, even when he didn't understand what was going on. He was very open to comforting me regardless. And we've had like a lot of hard conversations where what I'm saying verbally is scary and it doesn't make sense to somebody who is more neurotypical, but he takes it with so much grace and openness and makes me feel like a not crazy person, which I think is important because a lot of the times we can tell ourselves, oh my gosh, we're crazy, this is wrong, this is not okay to be feeling. And then to have somebody who comes in and, oh my goodness, who comes in and like for once makes you feel like a normal person about it is really nice, especially from someone who's neurotypical.
Before meeting her, you know, I didn't really know anything about mental illness at all. All that I knew was that, you know, there were people who had a tougher time than other people. And since meeting her, you know, it kind of brought reality to that situation. And so I think it's more so understanding everybody has their own demons and doing your best to put yourself in others' shoes while at the same time balancing respect for yourself. So dating someone with a mental illness isn't much different than dating anybody else. You know, it's just learning and growing together, understanding each other and what each other needs in different scenarios that might pop up, because everybody thinks differently. dating someone with a mental illness might have different challenges than dating somebody normally, but in terms of the process of learning and growing together, it's no different than dating anybody else.
Give yourself grace. You're not going to be perfect by any means, and recovering, whether you're recovering from like self-harm or addiction, but just to give yourself grace when you can't get out of bed or you don't have the drive to, work on yourself, because that's really difficult, and if you're not taking time for yourself to appreciate just existing despite all of this, like, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're doing so much for yourself just by being here. If you're not coping well one day, it's not the end of the world, and you're doing just fine.